Hello, everyone. We've all heard the news stories before. There's a chemical spill or some kind of leak in the area. But have you ever stopped and really thought about what happens after that? Where does all that pollution actually go? Because, well, it doesn't just disappear. Tonight, we're going to trace that hidden journey, follow its path right here through our community, and see how it can end up affecting all of us. So here's our game plan. We'll start right at the source of the problem. Then we'll follow that pollution as it moves across the surface, down into the ground, through our hidden water supplies, and even, believe it or not, up into the air we breathe. And by the end, you'll see just how connected everything really is.
All right, let's dive in. First things first, where does contamination even begin? It's usually not some faraway, abstract thing. More often than not, the source is something pretty familiar, something happening right in our own neighborhoods.
This is probably the most important question to ask, because if we know the starting points, we can get a much better handle on the risks to our community. And it's not just about some massive industrial plant. The sources are often a lot closer to home than you'd think. Just think about it for a second. That old gas station on the corner, it probably has underground tanks that have been sitting there for decades. Or what about that big construction site? What happens when a heavy rain washes over it? It could even be something as simple as someone dumping chemicals where they shouldn't. These are the typical starting lines for a much longer and often invisible race. So, once the pollutant is out there, its first and most obvious route is right across the surface, carried along by water. We call this surface water contamination. It's exactly what it sounds like. Rain comes down, washes those contaminants into our storm drains, into the local streams, and eventually into the river. This pathway is fast, and you can see with your own eyes how a problem can spread in a hurry. And this is a really critical point to get. A spill in one part of town doesn't just stay in that one part of town. Nope. Once pollution gets into a stream, it can be carried for miles in just a few hours. Suddenly, it's impacting communities and wildlife far, far away from where it all started. But okay, what about the gunk that doesn't get washed away into a stream? Well, that brings us to the next leg of the journey. Instead of moving across, the pollution starts to move down into the very ground right under our feet. This is what we call soil contamination. Instead of running off, the pollution just soaks right into the ground. But what happens next is a totally different story depending on the kind of soil we have right here in our area. And I love this analogy because it makes so much sense. Some soil, like the really dense, clay-heavy stuff we have in parts of our community, it acts like a sponge. It can literally grab onto those pollutants and hold them tight. But in other spots, where we have sandy or gravelly soil, it's more like a sieve in your kitchen. The pollution just pours right on through, heading deeper and deeper underground. And where's it going once it gets through that sieve? Well, it's heading towards one of our most precious and honestly most vulnerable resources, our groundwater. A lot of us get our drinking water from wells, right? Those wells tap into this groundwater. The best way to picture it is like a giant, slow-moving river that's just hidden from view deep underground. And just like any river on the surface, it can carry pollution right along with it. So here's how it works. A contaminant trickles down through the soil, it reaches that hidden river of groundwater, and then it starts to form what scientists call a plume. Just think of it like a big, invisible cloud of pollution that's spreading silently underground. And it could be moving right towards our community's drinking water wells. And that is the real scary part. Unlike a polluted river you can actually see, this kind of contamination can go completely unnoticed for years, even decades, posing a serious, long-term risk to our town's water supply. Okay, so we've seen pollution travel across the land and deep down into our water. But there is one more pathway that honestly just blows my mind. It's the one where pollution actually travels up. It's a process called vapor intrusion. See, certain chemicals, think fuels, solvents, things like that, they don't just sit there in the soil or water. They can actually turn into a gas or a vapor. So let's trace this crazy upward journey. First, the chemicals evaporate underground. Then those vapors start to snake their way up through all the tiny gaps in the soil. They can get trapped and pool up right underneath our homes. And from there, all it takes is a few tiny cracks in a foundation for those vapors to seep into our basements, into our living rooms. So a problem in the soil can actually become a problem with the air you breathe inside your own house. So we follow the pollution across the surface, deep into the ground, and then all the way back up into our air.
So what's the big takeaway here? What does it all mean?
The single most important thing to remember from all of this is that our environment isn't a bunch of separate boxes. It's all connected. A spill at a local business can seep into the soil, which can travel into our drinking water, and can then rise up into the air we breathe in our homes. It's one big system. And that leaves us with one final and really crucial thought. Knowing about a spill is a good first step, for sure. But really being aware, that means understanding all these hidden pathways it can take. The real question for us as a community is always going to be, where could it go next?